Hey, friends out there. See that right there? Yeah, that's my certification. I don't even have to have a teacher certification anymore. Silver play button. Today we're going to be talking about water and aquatic biomes. For those of you at home in my class, you guys need to draw and outline these different zones in the aquatic biomes. And I'm sure the other three of you who are watching this that actually need to know this, y'all need to be familiar with these zones as well, okay? On the bottom, we have the ocean zones, marine, and on the top, we have fresh water. And let's go through those real quick. So, I thought that this is something you probably tackled in 9th grade or should have, but maybe not. So, let's go back and make sure you are familiar with these different zones, okay? And we'll work our way through the different components and what they are. I'm going to draw those out and sketch them a little bit. And we will discuss those as we go through water and aquatic biomes. Now, on the off chance that we are out on Monday and or Tuesday for any kind of ice storm, then Monday is day 29 in Schoology, and I expect you to be on there and do whatever assignment's on there. So, just...
What are the chances of that?
James Penn this morning said that there was a chance, we're kind of on the bottom end of that. Northport's really the line, and above Northport that there was a pretty good chance Monday morning of having ice, freezing rain, and then also Monday night, and then there's also a possibility of like around Thursday having some kind of wintry mix. So I would suspect that at least one day next week we may have trouble, but we'll see. It's changed a bunch. So, you know, the weather forecast, like today, last week they were saying today there was a good chance of freezing rain, and then a couple of days ago they were saying Sunday morning, Saturday night, there was a chance. Then it only moved to Monday night, and now it's Monday morning and Monday night. So there's a lot of variability there. You got to think, though, freezing rain is kind of the bottom end of the precipitation spectrum, where like snow is where it's cold up high and it freezes. Sleet is where it freezes kind of in the middle and it's cold and it comes down. And then freezing rain is basically it's hitting you like rain and then it's freezing at the surface. So it's only cold at the surface. And so that's really hard to predict because you're talking about like, 1 or 2 degrees going from cold rain to freezing rain and having some major, 6 people died yesterday in Dallas in a major pileup due to ice on bridges. So something you got to be careful of. I guess you guys may wind up being lucky and just get cold rain, and if it freezes rain over in the north part of the county, then we may be out for that. So those are things to consider and look out for, especially if you have to drive around. And I know a lot of you people out there who live up north are already having to deal with some of these ice storms, which is the worst. All right, important concepts from previous units. Regulation requires energy. We talked about regulation as control. Organisms must regulate water levels within them in order to survive. Well, yesterday we said that water is important for what 2 main reasons? We need water for temperature regulation and removing nutrients and waste products in and out of your body. And I'll give a shout out here too. Our theater department is hosting the Putnam County Spelling Bee, which should be fabulous. No, I'm going. Maybe I'll get to spell something. Have y'all seen my spelling? It is subpar. A lifetime of not reading is really not paid off for me. I know lots of words. I've seen them on movies, and I know what they mean, but when you don't see them in a book, it makes it a little bit more difficult, Mason. All right, number 2. Water and sunlight energy are needed for photosynthesis. We spend a lot of time on photosynthesis, so I'm not going to backtrack that. Producers are the starting point of food chains and food webs. Now, where does the initial energy come in for almost every organism on Earth?
The sun.
The sun. The only producers that are not using the sun are?
Can you repeat that question?
The only producers on Earth that are not using the sun for energy are? This is what first period is talking about. Hydrothermal vent bacteria. So bacteria and hydrothermal vents, which are like deep down in the ocean, as the materials of the deep sea comes up out of the earth, like there's a lot of hydrogen sulfide and other carbon-based compounds, those bacteria can turn those into organic molecules. That's the exception. Those are pretty rare, and they're not, they're not all over the place. But there is a way that some things can produce that don't use photosynthesis. So I just wanted y'all to know that. Number 4, sunlight. Helps us to achieve photosynthesis, which provides energy for life. Producers make that, and then we consume that either directly or indirectly in the food that we eat. Now, for me, I don't like to eat a lot of vegetables, but I do like to eat lots of animals like deer and cows who do like vegetables. So I let them eat the vegetables for me, and then I eat them. And in doing so, I eat vegetables. Aquatic biomes. These cover roughly 75% of the Earth's surface. So this is freshwater and in the ocean. And are initially responsible for rainfall and global temperature regulation by absorbing solar energy. We talked about that yesterday. On the dark side of the Earth, it doesn't get super duper cold like it would somewhere like on, say, the surface of Mars, because the oceans help to absorb that heat from the sun, and then they help to dissipate some of that heat, okay? So it helps to maintain or regulate that temperature. Also help with O2 production and CO2 consumption. Now, aquatic environments probably are responsible for about half of all photosynthesis that takes place on Earth, which would be about half of the O2 production and half of the CO2 consumption. And so we don't see a lot of plants in the ocean or in ponds or lakes. Most of those plants that are doing that are producers are what? What are the main producers? What? Algae. There's protists, photosynthetic protists that are in the oceans. Now, they're not big, but because there's a lot of them and because the oceans are very big, then that makes up for a lot of that photosynthesis production, okay? Now, let's look back at the picture. Regions and oceans that are have different functions here. So, some terms you need to know. Photic. Photic means photo, light. This is areas and bodies of water, either lakes, ponds, rivers, streams, oceans. The photic zone is where light penetrates. And important to note, if light penetrates there, what else is important? That means photosynthesis is taking place. Remember what I said yesterday about this unit on the AP exam. When you're talking about ecology, you need to understand relationships between organisms, and the most important thing is you need to understand the flow of energy. How does energy flow between different parts of an ecosystem? Okay? So, photic zone. Now, there's some more nuance that we need to understand here. So read photic zone for us, Walker.
This is the upper region with light penetration. Red light penetrates deeper than other wavelengths of white light because it has the longest waves.
So red light reaches deeper. Now, there was a big FRQ one year, and it dealt with different wavelengths of light going different depths in a body of water. Okay, I think blue is maybe the shallowest, and then red as you get down, and I don't know what's in the middle, but anyway. What is that going to do to the organisms in the water column? Are you going to have the same organisms, you think, in each level?
No.
What do you think might be different?
The pigment of their light.
Ooh, Walker hit the nail on the head. I need a little bell when you get something right instead of just a no one. So if you are absorbing red light instead of maybe some of the other, so we talk about plants being green, which means they're absorbing like reds and yellows and blues and other stuff besides green, right? So, but if you're absorbing red light, then what does that do to your pigmentation? There's a lot of organisms that have that are reddish, that are purplish, that are different colors. So I would imagine that would probably affect your pigment range also. Yeah.
So in coral reefs, they're like a wide variety of colors and all that.
Coral is not a plant or a producer.
Okay.
Coral is it's an animal. It's an animal similar to, it's in the same phylum as like sea anemones and jellyfish. So it actually has tentacles. Now, coral reefs, like 90% of the coral on a coral reef, and I've actually got some from the Great Barrier Reef, y'all can pass around there if you want to. They live in a symbiotic relationship with algae. And so basically, for the most part, they're growing their own algae, and that's what gives them a lot of color. And they grow their own algae, and that's what they feed of. A lot of their food consumption comes from.
Because I know like a lot of coral can be like red, red color, so maybe is that one?
I don't know if that's directly related to their food source or just their genetics. Okay. You should look that up for extra credit. That's a good question. Bleaching is what happens when, yes, there's a lot of that. So when the temperature in a body of water goes above about 86 degrees, the coral, it's almost like their algae is like a coat, and they're getting kind of hot, and they just expel their algae. And so then they don't have anything to eat. It loses all its color, or most of its color. And then if that happens for a long period of time, or like for a few seasons in a row, then usually the coral will eventually die. And so in northern Australia, where we were on the Great Barrier Reef, like a lot of bleaching is taking place. It looked very dull and uneventful. If you guys go down to the Florida Keys, has anybody been down there? You ever go to the Florida Keys, stop in Key Largo? Have you been there? Did you go to Did you go to Key Largo? Did you go on the reef? Okay. Stop in Key Largo and pay about $60 and go out on a boat, and they'll give you all the gear you need, and they'll take you out snorkeling. And it will look like what you would expect out of Finding Nemo, a coral reef, to look like. It will be that vivid. There will be that many different types of fish and different types of coral, and you'll get to float on top and see all of those things. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But in some locations, like I said, in the northern Great Barrier Reef, there is a massive impact from that coral bleaching and that temperature change. Good question. All right, next thing, aphotic zone. The A in front of a word means? No or none. So it means no light. You wouldn't expect to have what here? Photosynthesizers, good. No light, no photosynthesizers. Now, there's some things that live there because, remember, things are going to die and they're going to fall through the water column to the bottom. So you've got a lot of what we call bottom feeders. And we call this area all along the bottom what? Including the photic and aphotic zone. Benthic zone, good. And so this is things where would be bottom feeders that collect stuff as it falls down. The abyssal zone, that's pretty cool. I think of James Cameron took a submarine down there to the deepest point in the ocean. Sounds like something I would do if I was making movies like Avatar. This is where you have the anglerfish. You're probably familiar with that one from Nemo with the little light on it. The anglerfish, since it's Valentine's Day, I'm going to tell you a beautiful love story. Okay? Y'all ready for this? So let's pretend that who could be a good couple in here? Good, Mason and Tay. So let's say that Tay was the female. The anglerfishes that you see with the little light on the front, that's the female. Okay. Now we're gonna have to adjust for size here, but the female is 20 times bigger than the male. Now we're not judging. Okay, and so the male is a small little thing and then the female is a little bit bigger. She's got the light. And so it's really dark and it's down deep in the ocean. And these two fish, just imagine there's no light. And I don't know that they're making a lot of sound. And they're just swimming around doing their thing deep down in the ocean. And like the male has a hard time. They have a hard time finding one another. And when he finds her, you know what he does? He grabs a hold of her on her backside somewhere. And he grabs a hold of her and he doesn't let go. And she needs him for making babies. So you know what they do? Because the way he grabs a hold of her, they start their blood vessels and stuff start to grow together. And they grow together and basically into one fish. And I've seen a picture of this. I used to have one in a magazine over there where you had this female anglerfish and you had this little polyp-looking wart thing on the back side of her that was the male who had just like grown into her, and she was using him for his sperm and he was using her for food and nutrients, and it was just It was the most beautiful relationship you could ever ask. It was literally two organisms becoming one. A most beautiful love story.
Why did you need to find people for examples?
Just needing, I don't know. Maybe if y'all want to act that out later, I don't know. Just don't get too graphic. All right. Yeah, thermocline. That we talked about the different layers in the water yesterday, right? About the lake and stuff. Okay, y'all need to make sure y'all know that. All right, regions of freshwater bodies. So this is the same, similar here. Littoral is the shallow, so like near shore. Limnetic's kind of out in the middle. You still have photic and aphotic, which is light and no light, and then benthic is the same. That near shore area is probably the most productive. I would say it's probably the only thing you really need to know about it. Now, skip on down to the bottom. Let's talk about nutrients. So nutrient availability. Eutrophic is like high nutrients. Meso means middle, so that's medium level of nutrients. And oligotrophic means low nutrients, okay? So we have a problem on Earth. Have you ever seen a pond that's like green on top?
Yeah.
What's that caused by?
Pollution.
Algae growth. So that term is called cultural eutrophication, where you have people, probably on land, they put out fertilizers or there's animal waste. It rains, it gets washed off into a pond. And once it gets washed off into a pond, what happens next?
There's extensive algae growth.
Algae grow. Algae are not super complicated. They grow, they die. What breaks them down in the water when they die?
The scavengers.
What's the decomposer mainly in the water? Bacteria primarily, okay? So bacteria are breaking them down. As they break them down, you apes people should know this over there. As they break them down, what do they use up?
Oxygen.
When you eat something, you're using oxygen, yes. So they're eating, they're breaking them down, they're using up oxygen in the water. And as they do that, then the oxygen gets depleted, and then fish and other aquatic organisms that breathe that water, they start to die. And so where you see a lot of fish come to the surface, and they die out. So anytime you see one of those algal blooms on a pond, it's not a good thing for the animals in there, okay? It's a bad thing. It means that there's too much nutrients and that there's not a lot of stuff living in there, except just a few things that can survive on really low amounts of oxygen. Now, on the next part of the notes, let's break this down into different aquatic systems. I'm going to go a little off script here so you people out there can follow along. You basically got three different types of aquatic systems. You've got flowing water, which would include rivers, streams, creeks, brooks, whatever you people call them out there. So water is moving quickly. We expect oxygen to be a little bit higher than in our standing water, which would be ponds and lakes. So the water's not moving as much. And so different things are going to live there. I'm not sure that we have any natural lakes in Alabama. If there are, I'd appreciate you letting me know. Most everything that we call lakes actually
Like a pond? Or no, like
it's a man-made reservoir. Yeah, it's dammed up, it's backed up on a river or stream. So it's pretty rare to see those anywhere, I guess, in the Southeast for the most part, just because there's not many natural barriers that are holding that back. And then the other type of aquatic freshwater system would be wetlands. So wetlands are made up of what happened?
marshes.
What are y'all giggling about? Mason?
Swamp and marsh.
Don't lie to me. Swamp and marsh. Swamps have dominant vegetation in swamps is
Like lily pads and stuff.
trees. And then, yeah, there's lily pads and other stuff. I'm just talking about around it.
Oh, okay.
And then marshes have, their dominant vegetation around them is grasses. Yeah, usually those are more up north. And so those are the two types of freshwater wetlands. That water, in some cases, like if you go down the Everglades, that water actually does move. It just moves very slowly. All right, and then let's talk about what else? Rivers. Okay, some important things to know about rivers. They have headwaters, and then I want you to change that other part from midstream to downstream. So we're just going to clarify. So where a river starts, the headwaters, and where a river ends, where it gets close to the ocean. All right, 3 things you need to think about. Where a river starts, the nutrient levels are high or low? Where it starts, low. Have you ever been to a mountain stream? It is clear, good. So there's not much nutrients. When a river gets close to the ocean, nutrient levels are high. You ever been to the Gulf and where a river's running out? Is the water clear? No, it's like black or dark green, right? Yeah, so high nutrients. Okay, so where rivers start, the oxygen level, no, let's go temperature. Temperature levels are lower, cooler. When rivers get close to the ocean, they are warmer. All right, where rivers start, oxygen levels are going to be higher. So remember, there's an inverse relationship there. In bodies of water, the higher the temperature, the lower the oxygen, and vice versa. And oxygen is your most important commodity in a body of water for those aquatic organisms. Okay? Yeah.
Why is it that there's an inverse relationship between temperature and...
Well, think about it like... I need a drink. Think about it like a Coke. Coke's got bubbles in it from what? Carbonation. So you get carbon dioxide. So it's a gas, right? So in the water, you got oxygen as a gas, gets mixed in there. A Coke, if you pour some Coke on a summer day and leave it out, what happens to those gas molecules? They get flat quick. Why? The warmer it is, those gas molecules are going to do what? So the warmer it is, the faster they're going to move. They've got more kinetic energy. And the faster they move, the more they're going to escape that drink, right? So the same thing applies to oxygen in a body of water. The cooler it is, the more it's going to keep that oxygen in. The warmer it is, the more that gas is going to bounce around and escape. Okay? Which leads to another important topic. Typically, the most productive waters in the world are what? Warm or cold? Cold. Cooler water gives you 2 distinct advantages. Now, I know coral reefs are found where the tropics are, okay? So I get that. Coral reefs have a lot of biodiversity. I don't know that I would say they have high productivity. If you go to cooler waters, cool water does what? Cool water is going to... Where's it going to go?
It's going to flow down.
Down. Cool water goes down, and then it's going to cause other water to come up as it moves down, right? It's not just going to hang out on top like hot water does. As it moves down, it's going to move that water around. Not only, cooler water also holds more what? Oxygen. So cold water, as it moves, is going to mix nutrients up, and it's going to move oxygen around. So you're going to have a lot more productivity in terms of the amount of fish and aquatic organisms that are relying on the stuff in the water. Okay? So that's kind of a... We normally think of like, well, the most productive areas, the hotter it is and the warmer it is. On land, that's true, but because of the oxygen component and that mixing up of nutrients, it's different in the water. So you need to wrap your head around that. All right, and then the last thing here, I don't think there's a good picture in this book. There was in the Apes book. 2 types of estuaries. Estuaries are the 2 zones where what happens? Freshwater and saltwater meet in estuaries. Good. So usually it's next to the ocean, and there's 2 types of estuaries. They are salt marsh and salt marsh is found in the temperate zone. Like if we went down to the bay or went down to Dolphin Island, we'd see salt grasses, salt-tolerant grasses all over the place. They are very productive. They are really good filters. They absorb, they help prevent flooding. They provide good habitats for animals. Basically, the babies like to hide in the grasses and stuff there. The other type of estuary is, we find in the tropics, the mangroves. Good. Now, you can go down to the subtropics of southern Florida. You're down at the Keys again, you'll start to see mangroves everywhere. Those are the trees with the little roots that stick up out of the water you can see everywhere. Mariah, you getting all this? So, they're found in the tropics. They are also very important. They help to maintain and actually help land grow and develop because they trap dirt. Okay? So both those are super important in terms of the environmental benefits and also the habitat for organisms that they protect. All right. The couple other zones I want you to be familiar with, intertidal, that's the area between high and low tide. If you, for those of you who are out there listening, all three of you who are actually listening to this point, just click on there and click like or dislike. Although last night I had a negative dislike, which I was pretty proud of. Not sure how that happened. So, has anybody ever seen an intertidal zone like the one on page, what page is that? 1175? You ever been to like Northern California, Oregon coast, Washington, up toward Maine, where you have a rocky shoreline like this?
Mason's been in Maine.
Mason, you have?
I've been in Maine.
Did you go to the shoreline?
Yeah.
Did you see something like this?
Something
Something
similar.
similar, yeah. If you go to the shoreline, a rocky shoreline, you will see something similar to like this in most places. And it's pretty cool. It's just because we have sandy beaches and there's not much life hanging out on the beach, right? And so this is typically in cooler water. You have these rocky shorelines, and you'll see sea stars and sea urchins and mollusks and all kind of fish and stuff hanging out. And it's just really unique. Now, if you want to get in the water, it's probably going to be pretty cold. So I'd watch out there. If you go snorkeling or swimming out there, shark might get you. Watch out for those great whites. But we got our own fair share of sharks here, so it's okay. I think bull sharks kill a lot more people than great whites.
Isn't it like pack hunters kill a lot more than great whites?
What kind of pack hunters?
Like sharks. Like
I don't know that many hunt in packs.
I know.
When I see them together, I think they're all reproducing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can't bull sharks swim in freshwater too?
Yeah, there have been plenty of bull sharks found way inland. They found one like 100 miles inland one time, I think. Yeah, so I don't know if it got lost or it's just like, hey, there's some fish in this water too. See what happens. And then the other thing is the coral reef. So we already got into those. I'm gonna pass it around. Walker, you can grab that bucket right there and pass that around. And then that gigantic clamshell over there. I got all that from the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. That reef, there was a cyclone that had come through, and so a lot of the coral was already damaged, and it broke loose, and then it just washed up on shore, and it's like a smorgasbord for reef collectors. All right. Any questions about aquatic biomes? Beautiful. So you guys at home who have this assignment, you are going to make a ecosystem brochure. So it's going to be on a specific ecosystem. There's an intro column. There's a column on, what's the next column? Climate. Climate needs to include what two things? Temperature and precipitation. If you are doing an aquatic biome, you will do temperature, and then you need to do some other water quality like salinity, nutrient level, oxygen level. You need to include something else, okay? Because we know it's going to be wet where you're in the water. The next one's going to be plants. I've asked you to do 4 to 6 bullets on each one of these. So when I say bullet, don't list out 4 plants and be done. I want you to pick plants that are characteristic of that particular ecosystem. So if it's a desert, you know, like a cactus, and this is why you find them in the desert. Or if it's the temperate rainforest, this is why you find redwoods there. Okay, so give a short description, and then on each one of the 5 other every column needs to have some type of picture illustration. So climate, plants. Same thing with animals, like why are these animals found there? Why are they characteristic to this biome or ecosystem? One on relationships, that's going to be like predator-prey, symbiotic relationships. And then the last one on flow of energy. Like what are some things that you can conclude about how energy is transferred in that ecosystem, since that's such an important component of this unit. So y'all guys can grab a computer and